Welcome again to OCR Sociology Heaven, and today I really want to talk about what culture is. It's the first thing that you'll see on the specification. If you get a hold of a copy of the specification for OCR A-Level Sociology, it is the very first question. I'd highly recommend all students printing off that specification, which is usually reserved for teachers. I don't know why it is, but it's a great opportunity for yourselves to take a hold of your own learning, to be responsible for your own learning, to tick off what it is that you've learned and what it is that you perhaps need to work on. So it's the very first question, so it's a good place to start. So what is culture? That's what we're going to be looking at today. Culture is a very confusing concept, and I want all students that are studying sociology to be aware of the fact that it is complex and you're not necessarily going to instantly understand it. So to illustrate this point, two American anthropologists in 1952 decided to try and come up with, or to look for, all the different definitions of culture that existed. And they actually found 152 definitions. So clearly, or historically as well, it's not been an easy concept to define. So do not be put off if you're not understanding it immediately. I thought I'd put this up so you can pause this video and just get down this particular definition, but this is the definition that you need to be aware of for what culture is. So the ideas, customs, and social behavior of a particular people or society. And some examples of things that might include the language, the dress, the music tastes, the diet, the economic system. These are all things that make up a people's or a society's culture. And just to illustrate this point so you've got some context, I just want to give you a very basic example for the differences in culture. So clearly, on the left, very unique style of dress. On the right, a very unique style of dress. In this particular society, this is considered normal. We know what's going on here. There's a wedding. It's a particularly normal celebration, and we expect this kind of dress to be occurring. On this side, to us, to British people, for example, really unique, really different, not something that we're familiar with, not something that we would consider normal. But equally, this style of dress would be very, very different to this person. They wouldn't really understand why we're dressing like this. What's the significance of this? Why aren't we painting our faces? These sorts of things. So this is just one example of cultural difference that exists. So I want to tell you 3 points about culture that are really, really interesting. They're not all on the specification for OCR Sociology, but they are really, really interesting points. So, firstly, culture is something that is learned, and it affects behavior. You're probably wondering why I've got a picture of 2 coconuts and an ice skater on the board, but in the Philippines, it's common for people to often have maids, and sometimes Americans come over for work, and they have maids that work in their houses doing washing, cleaning, etc., these sorts of things, so that there's less that they have to do so they can concentrate on their work. And there's a particular example of a man who was walking past his kitchen on a Thursday morning, and he wasn't normally in the house on a Thursday because he was usually at work, and he noticed his maid was in the kitchen, and on her feet she had a coconut that was split in 2, and it was attached to the bottom of her feet, and she was skating around the kitchen on these coconuts. And he walked past and he just thought, well, this is complete lunacy. What on earth is my maid doing? And he went and asked her why. He went and asked his wife. He said, you know, the maid is in the kitchen skating on coconuts. And she said to him, well, look, go back and see what you think she might be doing. And so he went back and he watched her for a little while, and he realized that she was actually polishing the floor, using the oil from the coconut to actually get a nice sheen or a nice shine on the floor and make sure it was really well polished. So, you know, that's an example of how different cultures have different behaviors. And so culture is clearly something that is learned, and it affects the way that we behave, and also affects the way that we interpret the behavior that is going on. Okay, so that's one piece of information, a good story as well. Secondly, culture can be differentiated from human nature and from personality. So what is human nature? This is something that is considered to be universal. From the highest professor at Harvard University, the most well-respected professor, to primitive cultures that live out in the Amazon. They all possess a basic human nature. It's universal, it's pre-programmed, and it's passed on through our genetics. So examples of human nature might be our ability to feel thirsty, our ability to feel hungry, our ability to feel love, anger, sadness, joy. All of these things are our universal kind of mental programming that we have when we arrive in the world. But culture is the way that we often express those. So for example, one might express love in a different way from one society to the next. So you obviously have these universal mental direction, such as the ability to feel thirst, but the culture affects the way that you express. Okay, so the expression of those. For example, human nature, we all want to have social relationships. We all have got a desire to find out about people and to interact with people and to find out about our own external environment. And these are expressed differently in different cultures. And our personality is a combination of both. Okay, so every personality is unique. And it's made up of culture and human nature, and some of the individual experiences that we have. Okay, so that's interesting that we can separate these three things. And lastly, the third point. Culture can affect our biological processes. So, this is a particular story that I read recently, where there was a lady in America who sat by the side of the road and she was cooking up some white meat. And some American tourists came along and they said, we'd like some of the white meat, and they were about to eat it, and they said, what is it? And the lady just remained silent. Shouldn't tell them. So the tourists continued to eat it, and as they said, it tasted a little bit like chicken, but it was slightly wetter, maybe slightly soggier or slightly tougher. It tasted like chicken, but it was slightly different. Anyway, so they were eating this and seemed to be enjoying it. And eventually they got it out of the lady there, so they asked the lady, just tell us, what is this meat they're eating? And the lady said, well, it's actually rattlesnake. Okay, so, and then immediately, those people that were eating it instantly started to kind of feel sick and want to vomit, and so they're vomiting up the rattlesnake that they've been eating. And so this is a really interesting point, because even though their digestive systems could handle it, and it's a normal thing for lots of people to eat in some cultures, in their culture it was so against the norm that even the thought of them having eaten it was starting to affect their biological processes. So their digestive process started to reverse, and they wanted to get rid of it. All right, so you can see how a particular culture, if it's really, really ingrained, can affect biological processes as well. All right, so that's three interesting points. I've got some further reading for you to do if you want. It's a really interesting document that I've taken some of those examples from. And also, it's just a good book. There's some good examples of how culture can affect people's actions. Okay, so we'll leave that today, and then next time we'll be looking at the different types of cultures, such as high culture, global culture, consumer culture. Okay, thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon. Bye.